What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to a Run Pass Opinion breakdown of the Bears, where I can't wait to rip through this Bears versus Saints game and talk through some of the finer points that I found on the Bears film, both good and bad on the offense and the defense. It's funny to talk about this game because I have seen, and already the chat has kind of mentioned exactly what I know the prevailing opinion is, which was this game was really, really bad. But I'll tell you what, one thing that I've thought is kind of interesting is that, sure, this game didn't go the way we wanted it to. We did end up losing at home, but we lost to a Saints team that's not a bad football team in and of themselves, took them all the way to overtime, and certainly looked much, much more competitive than we did against the Rams, who, of course, got throttled just a week later. It was tough, right? And of course, Derek, happy to stream. It's a weird game to talk through, therefore, because, again, in some capacity, it had some really, really bad moments, and we're going to get to them. But to say that it was all bad is to be, I think, a little unfair. And if there's too much buffering, let me know. I'm more than happy to go through and try to fix this and make sure that the stream is as healthy as possible. But let's get into it. Like you guys see at the top of the pinned comment section, I'm going to try something a little new. We've got a schedule. So what we'll do here is I'll try to hit you with about 30 minutes of analysis before we go into a more extended Q&A section. At this point, I'm abandoning the idea that I'm going to stay out of the broadcast footage, so if needed, we will be dipping into that, and I'm just going to count on y'all's donations if you do want to support the stream. Don't feel like I'm judging or looking over anybody's shoulder in any capacity at any point. If you can, great, but at this point, the monetization on the streams isn't necessarily enough to keep me from using the broadcast footage, and I can't figure out how to get the live replay of the chat to work anyways, so we'll feel it all out as we go. But either way, let's dive into it, and we'll start with a couple of the early plays. So one thing that I thought was really interesting is, and we'll start at the top, right? The Bears came into this game with a dramatically better scheme than they had throughout any of the other games, besides maybe the Buccaneers, that they've had all season. And let's go ahead and get set up with Game Pass on the Saints game. I don't know why it's stuck to the Rams game. We may have to play with it a little bit, but either way, this ended up being a pretty even matchup, in my opinion, given that the Bears were down, 3 starting offensive linemen almost immediately as Jason Spriggs went down. But even so, they were actually still able to run the ball a fair bit, and I thought that was fairly impressive. I mean, it's all little runs, right? It's like 4-yard clips here. This is, for instance, a 2nd and 3, where as we dive into it, and granted, it's the first running play of the game, but I know I remember, and maybe you did too, the Bears are running out of 11. Of course it's a pass. But so the Bears did much more 11. They did much more play action. And when they ran the ball, they ran it with a purpose. They had a scheme idea of what it is they were trying to execute. And they were able, in many cases, to generate some yardage here against a Saints defense that's incredibly good against the run. And that's always a positive. Let's see if this is the play that I'm hoping it is, because it's one that I thought was really, really intriguing for the Bears. It is. So this is one of my favorite actions that the Bears ran all game long, and it shows very quickly, in my opinion, what the Bears were trying to do on the ground. So they're aware already at this point that they've got Jason Spriggs in at tackle over here, so a backup tackle, a backup center, and a backup left guard, who, if y'all don't know my opinion on Rashad Coward at this point, he's not super great. But so they line up in this heavy set, which we talked about, with, it looks like 2 tight ends on the outside, and what they're going to do is a very simple toss out so that the running back can attack the C gap. I want to show what this helps with. So before we get into the pulling actions of these linemen, what this helps with is it puts Montgomery's starting point out here a little further. So Montgomery, even if he cuts it up the middle, like according to his brain, that would be out the C gap, or he can bounce it outside to the true edge of the field. Because he's able to start on this outside end, it helps him be a little bit less of an inside runner, true to form, and more importantly, it preys on the Saints' preconceived notion 100% of what the Bears' running game is. So let's watch this in slow motion and you'll see exactly why I like this play. Because it actually starts with a little bit of counter. They first bring in Darnell Mooney and then kick him back out, which depletes this guy and creates what is effectively a 6-man box with some other players on the end. So, yeah, exactly, ENB. I don't think Rashad's much. But so anyways, what the Bears do is with this tossing action, both tight ends are going to crash down on the end man line of scrimmage, and Charles Leno is going to push his assignment inside. This creates a healthy leverage block because these defenders are probably pinching in off of Montgomery's feint step in the first place, assuming the Bears are going with a handoff up the middle, which is incredibly common because think about it. Normally Montgomery would step in and then he'd go straight down, so the Saints defenders are going to play that and the Bears are using it to just funnel them off to the side, which is great for the Chicago. Not only that, but Mustipher and Coward are both pulling out wide, and what that allows them to do is that when Montgomery immediately starts this up, he's got 2 blockers, and neither of them are incredibly good players, though we can talk a little bit more about Mustipher in the Q&A section if y'all want to hear more about him. And at this point, Montgomery is able to make a decision on where he wants to go with the football, and he makes the decision to follow off the back of Mustipher, like we talked about, cutting it up inside and setting up Germain Ifedi right here for a quick 5-yard gain. That if Jimmy Graham had gotten out here and sealed off this man, or if Jason Spriggs had hit his cut block, they would have probably been able to get even more yards. But even so, I will always tell you that off of a 1st or 2nd and 10, any 5-yard run is a good thing, and this is largely because of scheme. Because think about it, you don't have a ton of guys that are down blocking. Charles Leno is feeding his guy back. Jason Spriggs just has to hit a cut block. Rashad Coward and Sam Mustipher, they basically just have to get in the way. This is a much easier run to execute because they're able to prey off of the Saints' preconceived notions and to see a little bit, if AD definitely doesn't... he doesn't exactly keep his balance or make some kind of crazy athletic play, and even on what you might even consider sort of a poor play by the Bears offense, they're still able to get 5 yards, and to me, that's what makes a good scheme, is even when something doesn't go well, they're able to get something out of it. From there, the Bears were able to continue moving the ball, because as much as I've heard Foles get a whole lot of criticism for a whole lot of things, he actually managed the game pretty well. No, he's not exceptional, and I would never tell you that Nick Foles is an extraordinary quarterback, but even on simple plays like this, he made what I think are plays that don't get enough notice. For instance, he wants this wheel to Montgomery, but he sees the safety cutting over, so he stays patient and he finds Anthony Miller in the middle. Now, I feel like that I just said a lot, so let me walk this back a little and you can see what it is that I want to talk about. First things first, there's this small thing at the start where take a look at where Foles actually fields the snap from. He takes a one-handed snap way off to his right and just moves on, which is neat. So at that point, he watches Montgomery, sees that the safety is probably going to cover him, and immediately turns and patiently waits for Anthony Miller to get open, obviously right here. And then Miller helps break his guy's ankles, which is great, and he and Miller have clearly timed this up because the ball comes in, whack, right there. Miller's able to turn it up and get 6 more yards. But what I will say is that on a play like this, you appreciate being able to see that the Bears are not only able to potentially give Foles that same rub look that they had a while ago, but also Foles is able to play off of it, see that the safety walks over, and instead hit Miller for a quick gain and a nice first down. But anyways, that's 2 plays. So Foles, solid. And exactly like you're saying, Ian B, there's a whole lot of stuff, but like in terms of blaming Foles. But again, we can get to more of that in the Q&A section, because let's rip through some just overarching stuff. Probably my favorite thing about this Bears game is that they used so much play action, it would make their head spin compared to other games. The Bears ran it they threw it 41 times, and they threw play action passes on 13 of those plays, creating a 31% play action percentage, which if you remember last week, it was a 16.4% play action percentage, meaning Matt Nagy almost doubled his use of play action. And what did that turn into? Well, I'm glad you ask, because on 2nd and 5, we saw exactly what play action could create, and there's tons of other examples. We can go through a lot of it, but basically whenever the Bears wanted to manufacture protection for Foles, they used what's called a run action play action, where as you can see, the entire Bears offensive line is run blocking, not pass blocking, and from there, Foles drops back, and he's got, you'll see it in a little while, a clean pocket with Darnell Mooney racing wide open. Also Anthony Miller getting open because he was very solid. And then at this point, boom, he drops it into the bucket, and sure, you could say it's a little underthrown, but I'll take an underthrown 50-yard gain over an incompletion, that's for sure. And like you're talking about, Jay Wood, absolutely, analytics say that you pretty much can't use play action too much, and even 40, 41, 42%, as some people are pushing it, is still enough to continue fooling defenses. And not only do you see that nice angle to watch the throw hit, but I want to take us back and take a look at this pocket, because wow, look at that, right? The offensive line, which again still has, Jason Spriggs, Charles Leno, Sam Mustipher, Rashad Coward, and Jermaine Ifedi, is providing what almost looks to be about 3 yards of utter halo. And absolutely, ENB, Miller gets open, and I like to tip my hat to open receivers because they're able to get open, and I think that's worth crediting, but the safety bites on Allen Robinson, which is exactly what Foles is waiting for, and as soon as he sees that safety move down to cover Robinson, he unloads in the space behind him, and bang, the Bears get a 50-yard completion, which is awesome. Again, this is a really cool play because if you watch Mooney over here, you're going to see that he feints an outside release, and he talked about this in an article I saw on 670 before, once he gets the corner to move out that way, going back inside and ripping right by him. I'll slow it down so we can see it. Let's see if I can catch the release. And snap. Okay, perfect. So keep your eye on Mooney here as he steps forward, throws just enough of that outside fake to weave right by his defender. Now that he's even, he's leaving. Foles waits for this safety to commit, and as soon as he does, he knows he's got space over the top, and voila. At that point, Foles hits the open throw, takes the layup as we used to talk about, and boom, they've got 50 yards. Another play that I thought, once you start building on these sorts of things, for instance, you're able to start playing with the defense a little bit. And this is something that Matt Nagy did pretty well, because here after a run that only gets 1 yard, and credit to Matt Nagy, whether the run was working or wasn't working, he stuck with it. And in this case, I think it's Ifedi that totally whiffs his block and ultimately gives up a run. Yes. So that's Jermaine Ifedi. You probably saw him in the right guard spot. I'll walk it back one more time, because remember, this offensive line still isn't perfect, but on an outside zone play like this, Matt Nagy's trying to give them the opportunity to get back in a rhythm, and Jermaine Ifedi, as you can see, kind of gets thrown on the ground. Montgomery has to make a play in the backfield, only gets 1 yard. And sure, Jay, I can certainly try to. I try to do as much of the view stuff as I can, but the Bears are able to follow it up with a play that I think is really fun, not only because it ends up in a touchdown, but because if you watch right here, the Bears recognize that the Saints go into a true cover one front. So they've got, one safety sitting back and a whole bunch of guys up here on the front. And Allen Robinson knows that that means that he's probably going to get a great opportunity on a corner route. And I don't know if, I really don't know if Robinson adjusts to this, or if the Bears just know what they want out of this defensive front. But I want you to watch Robinson run this in and out corner route, because it is something special. Seriously, Robinson's a fabulous route runner, and I could talk about him all the time, because this is prime Allen Robinson as he goes in, feints out, cuts back inside for the corner, and gets what he wants. I want to walk you through that one more time, because maybe you missed it at the very top of the route. And once again, this is off play action, by the way. I don't know if you saw that. It's true play action, so it's pass action play action, meaning that the line is still trying to block, but even so, it holds up the linebackers as Robinson starts heading towards the upfield. And right there, he plants his foot and throws his corner off. I missed it, so I wouldn't be shocked if you guys missed it too. And basically, so Robinson releases off his line right there, and he's going to plant his foot really hard inside off that stab right there, which feints as if he's going to run a dig route, which again, that would basically mean Robinson pretends that he's going to run a route like this. So make his break, run up and in towards the field, which catches the corner and the safety and gives him the opportunity to work right back out towards the end zone. And Foles lays a ball that's just good enough. Robinson lays out for it, and the Bears have, easily the prettiest touchdown drive that they've had all season. And it's awesome because this is the kind of thing that the Bears can build on. It's a play action heavy drive. It's Foles hitting his mark. It's Nagy taking advantage of defensive tendencies, and we can get more into it later. We'll consider this the highlight. But then we had the low light. And again, there's plenty more positives to talk about when we get there. But then we had this third quarter where it felt like every time the Bears had a big play coming up, because just like we saw on that last drive, the Bears still had moments where after the 50-yard play, Ifedi got burned and they only got 1 yard. So the Bears they need all three of their downs because they're probably going to muck one of them up, and that's just a given. So when the Bears gained 5 yards here at the start of the third quarter off of a nice quick Mooney play action that he races upfield for, and then the next play right here, they just hand the ball off. Let me see if there's anything special about the run action worth breaking down. Not really. It looks to me like, what is that? Spriggs doesn't get a great block right here. But this is, Spriggs played like a replacement level tackle, and that's all right. No, it's Mustafer. Mustafer in particular doesn't get much on this block, so 90's able to sit in the middle and basically play two-gap. And so Montgomery is forced to go outside where there's a sitting linebacker, as you can see, and the play ends pretty predictably from there with a 1-yard gain. But then, and I'm sure you guys already have an idea of what happened, sitting at 3rd and 4, which is fine because there's a lot of options you can run. You could run a meshing action like this and still work somebody open. You could run a quick hitch and it could operate really quickly. You could run a tight end stick. There are a lot more options on 3rd and 4 than there are at 3rd and 9. And as we saw, the Bears at this point fail to get lined up correctly, where Foles calls over Ryan Nall, and ultimately the Bears offense gets totally lost. Leno tries to let Foles know what's going on, and they end up taking a delay of game. This is where things really started, I think, to show the negative side of Matt Nagy's potential issues, where, again, to wind it back as far as Game Pass will let me go, and we can look at the broadcast here in a little while if you want to, Foles clearly calls Ryan Nall over right there, and Nall doesn't come. And I don't even mean that that's Nall's fault. I'm more trying to use this as an example of a clear miscommunication one way or another. Foles has to call again. He goes to get set up. Leno turns around, says, "Dude, what are you doing?" And they end up taking a delay of game, bumping the Bears back to 3rd and 9. And against defenses like the Saints, frankly, against any defense worth their salt, I'm going to be honest, guys, I love our Bears, but they're going to struggle against a lot of defenses because they're not that talented. Again, love the Bears, but it's not their thing. So from there, at this point, as they work into the offense, because let me rephrase that. With their offensive line where it is and about 5 weeks of practice, sure, I expect some miscommunications here and there were plenty, but taking a delay of game, especially in a game like this one, is important as the Saints game was because it's huge for playoff seeding. You gotta hope that they're able to at least get lined up correctly, and after they needed timeouts to save them in the Carolina game, and I believe they took a delay of game also in the Rams game, this is discouraging to see. And it may not be Nagy's fault, but you want to see them at least line up and execute their plays because as an offense, they're not quite good enough to survive random 5-yard losses. From here, the Bears give up a sack. I didn't think this one in particular was Foles' fault. There were some that kind of were. But this one, let me take a look. Oh, yeah, so Spriggs kind of gets fooled, and you probably remember this. So Spriggs sitting right here is going to step in front of the linebacker, and I'll slow it down. The linebacker gives the very Danny Trevathan-like hesitation, takes a look that way, and that gets Spriggs' eyes moving as he comes out of his stance, and the linebacker just runs right by him. And Foles is waiting for a play to develop that honestly doesn't really develop. Like, I'll walk you back through it. Some play calls don't work, and on this 3rd and 9, Exactly like you're talking about, Reeves. There's an aspect of the buck stops somewhere, and that's where I'm starting to pin some of these things on Nagy. And if you take a look at this play in particular, they try to run a triple mesh style play where they start from a bunch formation. Everybody tries to do something confusing, but Robinson's going to run a curl, Mooney's going to run a curl, and Miller's going to run an out route. But Miller's corner trails him well, and that's exactly why you see Foles pump fake right there before getting hit. Because if he throws this, it's likely getting batted down, which he doesn't want. A sack's no better necessarily, but you can understand the thought process. And yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Well, Hacks, it's funny because to say that the offense is talented is more to say that Robinson's good, Mooney's good, and Miller has his moments. But I like Miller as a talent. I think that there is talent to use on this offense, but certainly the offensive line is nothing incredible. The Bears also take a false start after this. Miller's not near the sticks, Mike, but if his corner's not on him, he can run up to the sticks. Yards after catch is something big in the Bears offense. But so let's think about this. They've now taken a delay of game and then a false start in back-to-back downs after a sack, which obviously isn't great. So from there, we move into what I think is easily the most famous discipline-related moment of this game, where the Bears, they get a nice little gain here. It's first and 10. They want to get things started after not a great opening drive. Quick out to Allen Robinson, where Foles just makes a read. He's either going to throw. If you slow this down, you realize it's a two-man game with Kmet and Robinson, where they're just picking on this guy. He shuffles out just enough to cover Kmet that Foles dishes the ball to Robinson, who turns upfield and gains 5. But the Bears lose 15 almost immediately. And that's because, and this is our first use of the broadcast on any of these, as we know, Javon Wims gets into a fight after the play. So let's get to, I must have picked the wrong one, but we will get back to that. And let's get to this play where to my understanding, it has to do with a mouth guard. Yeah, exactly, Sam. Where about 11 plays earlier, Javon Wims had his mouth guard taken by the guy who you're about to see. He just charges up to and socks in the face. And there's really no explanation for this that makes it excusable necessarily. I understand that there are some hardcore folks that are going to say he's just defending himself, but who in the world let this happen? I don't know. Because it's 15 yards the other way immediately. It's a massive embarrassing moment for any football team to watch one of your guys do something like this. I know when I was playing sports, I played lacrosse in high school a lot, and whenever our guy did something way out of line, you better believe it took the air out of our sideline, as we knew coach was going to rip us a new one. But either way, it's not the reaction you want to see. Again, he punches him, and apparently he didn't get enough because he palms him in the face. And I totally get that he can't stand Gardner Johnson, but this is just not the way you handle it. And so the Bears lose 15 yards, and immediately that forces them into a long down situation that I'm just going to tell you now, it's not very, the Bears are not that great in these long down situations. What you're about to see, just to be clear, is that Foles wants to get quick yardage back, so he's going to take a look at these two, who, if I remember correctly, they both run short routes. I can't remember the exact details, but they're going to get covered up pretty good. And so then Jimmy Graham is going to run what is a sideline fade as the Saints drop into cover 4. That's important to note, because what happens in cover 4 is that pretty much all the deep stuff is covered, and the best place, if you're going to go somewhere, is probably the sidelines. And like you said, Mike, yeah, he even celebrated after the punch, which was a giant bummer. But so maybe one of these days, Sam. But so the one thing that I think is misunderstood about this play, because I know when I first watched it, I even had to reach out to a friend of mine asking, where in the world is Foles throwing this ball? And after a lot of conversation, I realized it. So Foles is about to throw it, and that's really important, because what we'll see in a second is that Mustipher is taking his man and trying to handle what I think is a stunt, as Coward's completely lost his, and his guy's about to just roar in on Foles. So Foles knows he doesn't have a lot of time, and he sees Graham right here engaged with his man. And what he knows, Foles in particular, is that the Saints are lined up in this cover 4 setup. As you can see, they've got a dropping corner, 2 safeties, and this corner right here. So he thinks with Graham engaged downfield, why not just throw the ball back shoulder towards Graham so that he can turn around and make a catch on the sidelines, and we can at least move the ball a little further back towards the sticks. Graham, for some reason, and I'm not trying to pin this on Graham, I'm trying to explain to the best of my understanding what happens, cuts this route back inside into the help of the waiting safety, which I tend to doubt Foles expected. So he releases the ball, Graham runs back into a position where he's now double covered, and Foles throws it to a spot where if he had boxed out his man, he might have been able to make the play, as you can see, about 16 yards downfield. He's giving Graham a back shoulder opportunity where, again, remember where he is when he throws this ball. He's under pressure, he's about to get hit, he knows he has to throw it early, and Graham seems as if he might just push his guy down to about there and turn around. I get it. I like to think we've all seen quarterbacks try to lead their receiver, but Graham turns around as the ball is getting released and effectively runs away from the darn thing, and it's an easy interception for the corner who, credit to him, turns around and makes the play. It's a rough one. It's a miscommunication, and it's not something that you want to see. It's great evidence of the fact that Foles and his receivers are still building their chemistry, but more importantly, if you ask me, it primarily comes from the fact that they're in 2nd and 20 and Foles knows they're trying to move the ball. So it's not a play that you want to see. I'll happily pin it on Foles for those who are trying to score things with the quarterback and say that Foles absolutely has a hand in this. He's the one who throws the interception, but it's one that in theory you can fix, but in practice the Bears need to stop seeing as soon as possible. Yeah, I'm more than happy to play it in full view, and then Mike, we can even show it from the back. But that's the thing, ENB. It's a good question on whether or not the Bears should have had this cleaned up by now, because there's a real argument to be said that, hey, they've been playing for 4 weeks together, but there's also trouble going down the line where a lot of these other teams, like take the Seahawks for instance, Russell Wilson's been playing with DK Metcalf now for about a year and a half. You get a lot of these chemistry plays with guys like Drew Brees and Alvin Kamara that have had years or at least a year together, and Foles has had the better part of a month amidst a couple COVID shutdowns that have taken reps away. It's not a good play, and I would never pretend it's a good play, but I will tell you that in Philadelphia, these are the kinds of offhanded plays that Foles and Ertz, Foles and Jeffrey, Foles and Nelson Aguilar completed more than you realize. And I'm more than happy to play this from the start, Ilan. We can take a look back in a second, but one thing I will tell you is that pressure is bearing down on him if you watch the line right here as they stunt, and maybe he would have had a split second, but from what I can see, Foles is putting in a concerted effort to try to keep himself healthy, and I don't know whether that's truly a bad thing. It's just my gut reaction, because I've watched Foles get blasted in 2017, in 2018, in 2019, but starting around the Rams game, whether it's distrust or whether it's a message from the coaches, hey bud, don't get yourself hurt out there, we need you for longer than just one game, it does seem as if Foles, like has been talked about, is trying to keep himself upright, and that's part of why he took 2 total quarterback hits on Sunday instead of his usual, what do you think, 7? But yeah, exactly. So that's the trouble, Jack. It's weird because Graham easily could put the bar or turn around and catch that ball. Certainly, again, if you go back to this play, we'll look at it one more time because I do think it's important. It doesn't make sense for Graham to try to play this into the middle because there's absolutely no way he's open. If Graham takes this route exactly where he does, he has now taken himself into a bracket where this corner can come down and not corner, that's a safety, but this safety could easily come down and take anything in this area, and anything back shoulder now the corner's got control of. So I think Foles thinks Graham has recognized this because most NFL players, like even the tight ends and receivers, they try to recognize their defense and go from there. Obviously, Foles is wrong, and he and Jimmy Graham are not on the same page. But either way, you don't want interceptions, and I'm not about to try to pretend that this interception was actually a good throw or something like that. It's just kind of understandable when you think from the perspective of a quarterback trying to make a play on 2nd and 20. But anyways, let's keep going. So at that point, the Bears start to really dysfunction. They get I think they take, so this was one that drove me, not that one in particular. Then you get some plays where some things kind of go well, some things kind of don't. This play is a perfect example where a play call actually opens up a pretty decent shot downfield off of a play action pass, and Foles just can't connect. And you can't expect him to be 100% accurate on a deep throw, though you would like him to be a little bit more accurate than this. Bright sides, he's got a solid pocket. Downsides, the throw is long and high. If he puts it more into the middle of the field, I do think he gets this one. So for instance, solid pocket, decent block by Graham, and you're going to see Mooney start fading back. If he had just kept running, placed the ball around like pretty much anywhere in this zone, probably closer to that, actually. I think Mooney's ultimately able to come away with it, but instead he fades backwards, can't get it. If there's one thing that I do think is worth watching, take a look at Anthony Miller, who runs a fabulous out route, in and back out, and his corner is on the ground. This was a fun one to watch, and one that actually Anthony himself responded to me on Twitter about, because he knows it was good. But yeah, he gives him a nice shimmy shake, and then bang, hits that out route, and Foles is already gearing up to throw to Miller, and he's not wrong. Not Miller, Mooney. Because if Mooney, or if he hits this throw to Mooney, it's a massive gain. And not to mention he's already in motion as Miller is trying to get the ball out. But this is one that if I had to guess, Miller and Foles are going to talk about on film, and he's going to say, hey, if you don't think you can hit that throw to Mooney, make sure you take a check my way, because look at what I'm able to do. And yeah, it's a tight play, certainly one that goes against the Bears, and I have absolutely no idea if that's play or pass interference. I tend to get the impression that if the throw's not good enough, referees keep their flag in their pocket, and this was right on the line of uncatchable. And it's not, Sam. As my birthday, my wife just got me a rad birthday present the other day. Yesterday was a strange one, but we'll leave politics at the door. Certainly, I think we could all agree with that. At this point, then, the Bears now lost that early down. They try to get a good run here going, and this is the kind of thing that, again, there is some positivity here, because the Saints are a very, very good run-defending team. The Bears were able to move the ball a fair bit on the ground with an absolutely terrible offensive line that shouldn't, quote-unquote, be able to do that. And like you said, Jonathan, Mooney is so good on those deep routes. It's insane, and I don't mind at all that the Bears are not only trying to get the Foles-Mooney connection going, but put on tape that they can hit those, because in 2019, the Bears stopped getting respected altogether downfield because Mitch couldn't hit his deep shots, and they just left him open. So the Bears have to hit some if they're going to generate the light boxes that they want. And as you can see, again, they're running out of 12 personnel. 12 is their heavy set now, which is really important in my opinion, because what that means is that they're consistently able to generate, in this case, it's a 7-man box, but a lot of times they either get 7-on-7 or they get 6-on-6, and that really helped the Bears running game as they ran little stunts like the guard pulling around here, tight end cutting out this guy, and Montgomery, of course, wriggling right behind Spriggs and getting out in the open field. At that point, honestly, when Montgomery gets going, he's surprisingly good. He's able to make some plays in terms of breaking tackles and moving forward that I don't actually see a lot of running backs do. And he doesn't have the explosion of plenty. It might be, if my eyes are deceiving me, it is 11. You're absolutely right. So thank you, Akusai. There are a couple times where the Bears went 12, and honestly, my eyes aren't as good as counting as I'd love to pretend they are sometimes. But yeah, it's at this point, The Bears were able to keep going, and then Nagy calls one of, I don't know, you could call it a questionable play call. I think that I get what they want to do. They wanted to try to steal some first downs on the ground to keep the running threat alive and try to push the Saints back. If you take a look at their defense, these spread out formations like this, you kind of know who you're trying to block. So if you can hit the blocks right here, there's nobody at the second level to necessarily steal your run from you. And the Bears try to sneak in a quick 3-yard gain. They ultimately can't quite get enough from their blocking up front, and they can't do it, which is a bummer. Because at this point, like you can see, Coward is tasked with a really tough reach block. Montgomery bumps straight into Leno as he tries to roll around behind him. Coward's not necessarily there, and because there's no hole that's been opened up, Montgomery gets one and stops. So bummer, but it's a play call that the Bears seemed to really let get to them as they continued to spill out from execution issues that came from there. This is sort of the idea that I want to paint. The scheme was pretty good on Sunday. Again, they used more play action. They used creative running here and there. They tried to help out their linemen when they could, and I thought Foles' play reflected that, where he had, 274 yards. Montgomery had more yards than he basically has all season against an incredibly good Saints running defense, and yet discipline issues and execution problems ended up being a massive problem, where it seems to me that Matt Nagy has an issue with teaching a lot of this stuff. I can go find a play that I think fits this attitude better than any, where it is right here, and it's a quick screen that's going to go really poorly. So I'll warn you about that right now, and we can watch the play together. So what you're about to see is a quick out to Cordarrelle Patterson, where Allen Robinson's going to come try to create the first block on a tunnel, as Patterson is supposed to catch this ball and come inside. And you'll actually see that he gets a pretty decent hole, but there's just one problem. Right off the snap, Patterson doesn't move. He just steps right backwards, waits for the throw to get to him, and he gets tackled. Now, I've seen this play run a couple of times, and in almost all situations and circumstances, yeah, I know, right, Akusi? You want this runner on a tunnel screen to, let's get to it, you want him to come back to the football. So you want him to come here, catch it, and run up into the tunnel. It's why it's called a tunnel screen. But instead he stands out here at the edge, and he gets hit almost immediately because whether it's that he doesn't have a feel for it or what, the Bears are actually able to open up not a bad running lane for the guy, but Robinson can't get there because Patterson doesn't carry the man into him effectively, and it's a massive problem. And Ray, I know that you could say he gets maybe 5, but it's way better than losing 4, especially when just a little while later, let's see if I can find it offhandedly, I think this is it. Yeah, on 3rd and 13, Alvin Kamara does it correctly. And that you mentioned it, Ray. It's exactly right. Where Kamara right out here is going to run the same play, where he's actually going to freeze Sherrick McManus with a quick step up as he cuts backwards and back in towards the football, and bang, McManus can't get there. He's close, just like he would be with Patterson, but he's not there as Kamara then runs away from him and is able to set up his blockers, gain 12 yards, and as we know, they ended up going for it and continue moving. It's a problem, but anyways, he did read it right, Jack, but it's not that tough of a read for a corner when ultimately the guy moves back because they've seen it a billion times. At that point, I really do think that Patterson needs to catch that ball and come back in towards it so that he can help set up his tunnel screen. Kamara shows us how it's done properly, and I wish Patterson could have done the same thing. It's these little details where I think Matt Nagy's offense has been really lacking. It's not that their scheme is horrible, and certainly their game plan here to go deep against the Saints when possible and frankly keep the ground game alive for the sake of play action, it worked. They kept getting deep shots open. There are so many of these drives where if they had a decent drive at any point, it partially came off of a play action pass, just like this. 13 play action passes, almost all of them got first downs, and none of them lost yardage, because just like this, they're able to fake that play action, freeze the linebackers just enough, help create a healthy pocket, as we'll see Robinson's able to shake open on yet another beautiful route right there, a stop and go action where boom, he gets the ball, 28 quick yards, which is awesome. And you're right, Reinhardt. There's a serious truth to the idea that Tariq Cohen would be running a lot of these, and the Bears are struggling to fill his role, which is a massive problem. But hey, they're trying to do their best, and this play action stuff, they need to keep it up. I mean, look at that. Even Rashad Coward, yeah, sure, he loses the block here, but he's able to hold it long enough to where Foles can deliver amidst that pressure, and the Bears get a huge chunk play. Jonathan Wood has been talking about it. Jonathan, it's great to see you in the chat, because you're able to talk about it, but explosive plays are the heartbeat of an NFL offense, and basically anytime the Bears got an explosive play, they scored one way or another. They need to be able to keep this up. And in overtime, it's sad because I really do think that we saw the worst of everything and yet kind of the best. Jay, I'll get there in a little bit, but because we've got to move on. But for instance, Foles and the Bears take this sack right here, which is a nasty one. If memory serves, let me see. Because I actually have to remember, oh, look at that. It's the rare play action pass that didn't work. Obviously, I needed to brush up on my overtime film. But so let's take a look and see if we can suss out where the problem is. It looks to me, if there was one that I would probably pin on Foles, it's that he hangs on to this ball for an awfully long time. And I'm sure if we took a hard look, we could find something that ultimately might have been open enough for him to at least get rid of the darn thing. Even though Spriggs, it looks like, lets his man go. We'll take one more look at it. I'm not trying to spend too much time on this play as 93 gets by and Foles hangs onto the ball. But then immediately, credit to the Bears, they're able to squeeze Robinson open on this out route, which is like a triple breaker, and Foles lays a nice ball out there to extend the drive, which is awfully neat. This is a straight drop back. Foles stays calm in the pocket and lays out a nice one despite Anthony Miller drawing some contact. We'll watch from back here as he ultimately adjusts himself off the safety. Perfect throw. This is great stuff. The Bears move to 1st and 10 once again. But so, which reverse fumble? Oh, man. Oh, A and B. That would have sucked. Either way, this is when I know I got kind of sad because the Bears call a really nice little play where Miller just walks forward and jets out. Miller's open. The throw is good enough, and he drops it. Bummer. Okay, so you move on. And the Bears probably lose out on 7 yards here. And again, that puts them a little further behind the chains, but hey, at least they've got another down, right? They're able to work with that. Well, you would hope that they would, but Jimmy Graham can't hang on to the ball either, and now it's 3rd and 10. And after the fact that the Bears have now been pushed into 3rd and 10 after being in 3rd and 15 and just barely converting, they're not able to do it again as Foles ends up taking a sack on this one, which, look, it goes down in the stats as a sack, but I understand exactly what Foles is doing on this one. I've watched this one a couple times because nothing really gets open downfield. At this point, we've got covered, we've got bracketed, we've got covered, and we've got covered, and it looks like we've also got covered downfield. So Foles, not mobile, tries to take a look, and he thinks about lofting a ball up to here. But I don't blame him at this point for not throwing the ball because he's already lofted up 2 plays that we can go over more in the Q&A section where he just floated the ball up and gave his guy a chance. And if he throws an interception right here, we are wanting him off the team. So instead, Foles does what a lot of defensive coaches do. He sits back, he says nothing was there, he takes the sack, and he turns it over to his punter and his defense. And at that point, the Bears lose. And if you ask me, it's a bummer because off of a sputtery stop and start day in which the Bears scored 23 points, is not that bad. Certainly one of their better showings, sadly enough. The Bears offense turns it over to their defense, and their defense can't stop the Drew Brees-led Saints. And that's where we're going to move into number 2. Maybe he could have, Jonathan. That's a good point. And frankly, I'd criticize Trubisky for that, I guess. So I'll put it on Foles too, where I think he must think about it, sure, but my guess is on fourth down, Foles is so pro throw in most of these circumstances that by the time he realized what was at there, 91 had caught up to him. I'm not trying to sit here and say this is a great play by Foles, but again, it's not like there was a magic open thing downfield, and at least it's not a massive yardage loss. It's like 2 yards, maybe 4 yards. So nothing huge, but yeah. And then at this point, they turn the ball back over to the defense, and the defense is able to march down the field.